It's always an honor to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. And let's have you just talk about how you got started on your journey to become the strength coach that you are.
I appreciate it, Jesse. And yeah, for you and everybody at markbell.com, I appreciate you guys thinking about me and having me on today. And to the listeners, I hope I don't bore you. Hope we can get some embracing and stimulate some thought and give you some things to think about as well as your own training and hopefully even in life in general. But my first thing I would say is, like anybody else, most people get attracted to iron because of somebody else, right? Like, you don't really know what lifting weights means until you see somebody else lifting weights. And I was fortunate that my dad was into it a little bit, not as crazy as my high school coach, but him and my high school coach had played together. And my high school coach, and at the same high school that I wound up playing at. And my dad had a full basement. We had a full basement of weights. Like, we had the old standard York plates. Like, till this day, like now that I'm kind of a weight room historian, we had standard gold plated or gold colored 50-pound York stamped plates at our house. And I'm like, God, whatever happened to those? If I would love to have those in my gym right now. And
hell yeah,
cool stuff we had. We had, an old standing incline board. We had a makeshift, I didn't even know it was called a Smith machine at the time. We had a makeshift Smith machine made out of PVC pipe that we had two huge sewer caps that were the weights for it. I mean, there was just like stuff we had in the gym. And so my first real venture of lifting weights was probably before 13, probably 10 or 11. We would just dibby-dally in my dad or my basement with two friends of mine, the DiNapoli brothers, Mike and Dom, who were a little bit older than me. Dom was 1 year, Mike was 2, and they were the ones who convinced my dad to let me start playing organized football earlier than my dad had wanted me to, but I was bigger than most. But I would say that the true point of the lifting career, so to speak, happened probably when I was in 7th or 8th grade, and my dad would start taking me up to the high school on Saturday mornings to watch a guy named Pete Antonelli train. Pete was one of the first bigger recruits that I can remember that was coming out of my high school. He wound up going to Maryland, but our high school coach would open up the gym on Saturdays just so Pete could work out with him by himself. And because my dad knew Pete watching him play and obviously the relationship with my high school coach, I was able to watch them a lot. And that really was like, okay, this is more so, I think it was my dad showing me, you want to be a good football player? If you want to get out of Inwood? I mean, because back then, the only way I was getting out of my hometown was a football scholarship or I was going to work sanitation with my dad. So it was either it was all in or all out, and nothing against the sanitation, man. It's a big time job with hell of a benefits. And my dad wound up working there over 30 years and being a superintendent and all that. But that wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do. And I think he didn't want me to do, like anybody else, you're always trying to figure out ways to blossom your children outside of what you've accomplished. So I watched that like wholeheartedly and understood. So soon as it became time for me to really figure out what it meant, I was in 8th grade going into 9th grade, and we started to pick up the tempo a little bit. But in my high school, high school didn't start till 10th grade. So 9th grade was actually in the junior high. And during that time, one of my other dad's jobs outside of the sanitation was he drove the school bus in the afternoon so he could keep an eye on me. And then he was like ranked one of the number one bouncers on Long Island when when I was growing up. So he had 3 different jobs to make sure that I could do and my sister could do what we wanted. So I would jump on the junior high bus after school because his route actually went right by the high school. So he would drop me off at the high school so I could go lift, and then he'd come by and pick me up at the end. So that's kind of how the organization started. And my high school coach in the 80s, we were way above the norm in organized strength training. Like it was, if you don't lift weights, you don't play varsity. And in my high school at that time in the early 80s, if you played varsity as a sophomore, you were like considered legit. And then if you started as a sophomore, you were like more than you earned major props from the seniors if you wound up starting as a sophomore. So I went up there as a immature, naive, very, I don't want to say scared, but maybe a little intimidated of walking in a weight room for the first time, and you see these guys who are seniors who have already been in the program for 3 years, and just general size wise, I wasn't much different than them, but just muscle. I was a young ninth grade. I started my first high school football game in 10th grade at 14 years old. I went to college. Shit. I was 17 years old as a redshirt freshman, the youngest guy on the team. So I was an October baby. So I was big for my age, but from a maturity level, I was still young for the class of school I was in. So I came in and absorbed the process. We had I would say our program, based off of what I know now, was a combination at the time of what the University of Maryland was putting together and what Penn State was doing. So Maryland, why Maryland? Because my high school coach's college head coach at Virginia Tech was now at Maryland. So obviously we're going to adapt a lot of that methodology. And I still don't know why Penn State. I kind of figured out Penn State later on, when I learned that most of our accessory work was one set to failure, and then we would bench and squat and deadlift for like our strength stuff. But again, it was organized. It was nothing's mandatory, but it was pretty mandatory. I mean, and my high school coach was extremely committed to it as a trade. The other thing that I was fortunate about was my dad was, I think, 3 years older, and my high school coach was 4 years older than Lyle Alzado. So Lyle Alzado is like the creme de la creme of football players that come out of our high school. So everybody, Lyle was the king. Like my era, you were a football player, you knew Lyle. Like I wore 77 in college because of Lyle Alzado. And fortunately, because my dad had a rapport with him when he did come back through the 5 towns in Inwood. I've actually got lucky enough to train in the same gym with him at the old Jackal Lane in Lawrence.
Oh, wow.
Got to learn and understand what it takes to be a professional athlete. And I think, if we're on markbell.com, I think we can spoke a little bit openly about, supplement utilization. And I know a lot of things that Lyles had come clean with at the end of his career, I think has cost him a Hall of Fame nod, because even though they didn't track sacks unofficially, he had 127 career sacks as an NFL defensive lineman, and he doesn't even get a look because he was willing to come out and say that his whole career he was on steroids, and he felt like steroids put him in the position to be the type of player he was. And I think there could be some merit in that, because obviously they're performance-enhancing drugs. But the thing, like we all know, if you ain't working hard and you ain't putting in the time, it don't matter how many steroids you're on. And for the way he worked, because when I first met him and really met him, he just got let go from the Browns and it just got signed by the Raiders. So he was in full-blown, I got to prove these fools wrong mode and show him I still got it. And he wound up being comeback player of the year that year, and then wound up winning the Super Bowl with the Raiders, which was the pinnacle for anybody in the NFL. So I was exposed to some things early that I understood that you still have to have talent. Like if we're talking about lifting to be lifters, that's a totally different conversation that I would learn about later in my own competitive career. But at that point in time, lifting for athletics, no one really knew what that meant. I mean, you just knew that, hey, man, let's get stronger, and it could help you get faster, and it might not get you hurt as much. And but now it's evolved into such a different types of domain of what athletic-based strength training means. Till back in the 80s, it was just like get in the weight room and lift weights. There was no progressions. I mean, I did the same program as the senior, didn't even know how to lift weights. It's like, here's the program, go jump in and go. no disrespect to my high school coach. That's the way it was done. I mean,
Right.
just like, like even when I first started as a strength coach in college, if it was 80% squat and that was 405 for you, there was no warm-ups. You walked in the room through 405 on the bar and started lifting. Now that would be, you would be considered, a poor coach to do something like that. So it's also an evolution of learning and stuff. And obviously, fortunately for me, that ability to work hard and learn those types of work ethics and being ingrained in strength training early on gave me the opportunity to enhance my skills enough where I was fortunate to get multiple scholarship offers. And like I tell people, I was fortunate enough. Now, I don't even star system. I wouldn't even know where to rank myself in the star system. I just know that I put myself in a position where I got to choose where I went to school, if that makes sense, rather than I got one offer and it's either you go there or you don't go anywhere for free. Like, I had multiple choices to go to school, and my three final choices was Syracuse, South Carolina, and Wake Forest. And I'll be 100% honest with you. Knowing what I knew, the people who were in my corner, what I had available to me going forward, I chose Wake Forest because I was going to be a big fish in a little pond, if that makes sense. If I'd have went to Syracuse, I would have started at Syracuse possibly 2 years, maybe 3. If I went to South Carolina, maybe South Carolina was pretty good back then. It would have been a little tougher to break the lineup, but probably similar 2-year probably starter. But going to Wake, one, I was recruited heavily as an offensive lineman. Wake said that I could play defense, so that kind of helped them in the recruiting process. Plus, I knew right away I could start 4 years at Wake Forest. My whole thing was people thought, oh, man, you must have been pretty good in school, highly academic school. I had nothing to do with academics. It had to do with how fast could I start and get to the league. Just like any other player who has Division I aspirations, it's how do I get to the league? And I felt that was my best direction. Now, that whole got derailed. When I got in, I did really well in fall camp at a point where they were thinking about not redshirting me. And that was the only time my dad stepped in at any point in my career and said, they called him and told him, and they asked him what he thought. And he goes, absolutely not. The kid's 17 years old. I don't care how good he is for you. He's going to be playing against 23-year-old men, and he's not ready for it. And so they redshirted me, and during that time, I wound up by the next spring, I was about 285 and already one of the biggest and strongest guys on the team. And my whole plan got derailed the last week of spring ball when I had beaten out 3 upperclassmen and was told I would get the starting nose guard position. And on like the last 10 minutes of practice, I was in a pass rush situation. I'm going into I don't know what I hit the quarterback. I can't remember if it was a sack or not. That's irrelevant. The defensive end got blocked into me and I blew my knee out. So here I am sitting. All right, man, here's what you wanted. 4-year starter. It's go time. Let's go to the league. And within one play, in the 1980s, you didn't want to have any type of knee injury, let alone an ACL and MCL tear. And that's the last thing you wanted. And sure enough, that was my diagnosis. So that would happen on a Saturday night. By Sunday morning at 8:30, I have surgery. So I missed my whole next year. So I don't play football for an entire year, rehabbing. I'm working my butt off. Something's not right. I go through half a spring ball going into my sophomore year, and I'm like, guys that I was just dominating, couldn't get a push. My strength was okay, but just couldn't do the things you need to do on a football. And I'm like, something's wrong. And they didn't want to go in and scope it until a full year from the original surgery. And sure enough, I find like, you got to go in. There's just something is wrong. Like I'm crying my eyes out because I got these dudes that I was just smoking that are just making me look like some chump. And I wasn't going to go out like that. And sure enough, when they went in to do what they thought was going to be a scope, back then we had athletic training classes where we were allowed to watch. We were able to get access to watch surgeries. And one of my buddies, who's now the wide receiver coach at Louisville, was actually in the surgery, and he saw it. where he's watching the surgery and they're going through the scope and they're cleaning out a bunch of stuff. And he goes, hey, what's that? And what had happened was back then, they don't do it now, but they would staple the MCL together. Now they just let it scar down. And the type of staple they use, the best I can to describe it was like a tabletop. So it was a flat piece with 4 prongs. And one of those prongs had broken up. It had slid into my knee joint. So just think about like putting a pencil in a door hinge, and you can't extend it or close it all the way. So for about 6 months, I was training, running, doing old school mat drills with this prong stuck in my joint. And everybody's trying to say, oh, he's not working hard enough in rehab, something's up. And my buddy said they pulled it out and it extended my knee like 10 degrees.
Oh, man.
So I don't know what's happening. I get up from the surgery. I start walking around thinking I just got scoped. And then they told me this and like, you're never going to believe what happened. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? I'm some friggin' statistic in a medical journal now? That doesn't help me in what I want to accomplish. So now the whole process is like, I'm sitting in a hospital bed, like, I'm not stupid, man. I know how it is, man. I'm like, man, ACL, MCL, what do I do now? It's like, now I got to go to school. I got to graduate. I'm not thinking about that stuff. I'm thinking about getting to the league. And again, it's just my story. I mean, and so now it's like, okay, now you got to rehab. Now you got to come back. And so I rehab, So I haven't played in the game in 2 years since high school. I go into my sophomore year. I have 2 surgeries under my belt without a game played. I'm playing first game. I'm a backup. Second game, I'm a backup. Third game, I'm a backup. Fourth game, we go up to Army, and I'm from New York. So I've got like 50, 60 people up there. And the same coach who had told me that I was going to be starting that spring ball before I blew my knee out was a GA at the time. Now he's my position coach. And he says, hey, man, if you have a good game up here this week in Army, we're going to start you the next week. So what happens when I go up to Army on that terrible turf at Mikey Stadium? I blow the MCL out in my other knee. And now it's I never seen my dad cry much back then, crying his eyes. I'm consoling him because I'm in shock. So now a 4-year, my goal was to be a 4-year starter is now down to 0, right? And I got 2 years left. Kind of my therapy. It was my abilities to do things under my own pretenses, build a relationship, obviously, with the strength coach because I'm always in there lifting weights. And it was just something that I just enjoyed. Like it was not a chore. Like if you coach athletes at any level, the large majority of them lifting weights is a chore. It's something they have to do. It's not necessarily something they want to do. And that's something you have to accept as a strength and conditioning coach for athletes. So now I have 2 years. I wind up coming back later in that year. I played 1 game and then shut it down. It just wasn't there. So in 2 years of eligibility, I played in 5 games. Now the worst thing that could happen to me is we have a coaching change. And I'm like, right, like here we go. But like you say, you make the best of coaching changes. And luckily for me, I made the best of mine because when Bill Dooley came in and recognized me the first time he said it, man, we got to get you healthy. You're the biggest guy I've seen here. He's coming from Virginia Tech and North Carolina where they had Bruce Smith and Amos Lawrence and all these high-level dudes in the 80s. And we come to Wake Forest. He's used to seeing 20 guys that look like me, and I'm the only one he's got. So they again, now I'm working. At this point in time, this staff recognized my work in the weight room. It wasn't necessarily summer programs like there are now, but some of us started to begin to stay in the summer. And a lot of my teammates, and I was designated a leader, were told, find out when Big Joe's lifting and you train with him. And then I was told that if these guys don't train with you, it's on you. So you're gonna reap the repercussions of it. So that's really was and I've got guys who will tell you, as much as we loved our strength coach, there was some times in the summer where I was kind of the ringleader of getting the groups together to train. So we would train at like noon in North Carolina because it was hot down there, and we were in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So if you guys understand what that means, Winston-Salem cigarettes, our R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company was less than a mile away. 7 a.m. practices, you're gasping for air doing up downs, and all you're doing is smelling the tobacco burning from the factory. So it's a crazy world, but that gave me what I would consider my first unofficial coaching job. And we were, I was writing programs out of Muscle and Fiction at that time. I mean, that's where we would get most of our information. I at that point, I had realized it was time to choose a major, and I knew I was going to head in that direction because because again, here's my strength coach. I'm like, you can get paid to be a strength coach and lift weights and hang out and watch dudes lift weights. So I became a health and sports science major, continued to dominate weights. Met my wife during this time, going into my junior year, and she was an avid lifter at that time. She became one of my better training partners I had ever had my last 2 years because she was into lifting and running. And back then, long distance running was still part of the conditioning plan. So we'd go out and run and all that other stuff. And, but then to piggyback stuff. So I wound up starting 2 years as an offensive lineman, not a defensive lineman. And I always say those guys, I always credit the coaches, Coach Dooley, Coach Jordan, and Coach Yoshida for giving me a career, because I could have easily have been a never was. And I wound up being a has been, which is better than a never been. And I tell people, like, you say, man, that's a tough story, but is it really a tough story? I mean, I was a 2-year starter for a Division I football program. So I always go back to looking at the positives of not what should have, could have, would have happened. At the end of the day, as we all know, if you ask somebody who didn't have the opportunities I had and said, would you take a 2-year career as being a Division I starter? There's a lot of people that have raised their hand. So I feel fortunate enough to have done that. And I knew right away I was going to get into coaching. I was classified a medical reject from the NFL right off the bat, so there wasn't no sense of training and doing anything to prepare for a tryout. And I got into coaching right away. I coached 2 years of high school ball. Didn't want to coach on the field. Like, I wanted no part of coaching on the grass. I wanted to coach the entire team. I wanted to be in the weight room. I felt like for whatever reason, that's where my passion was, and that's where I could give the most back to a team. But at that point in time, high school was not where I wanted to be, and now it's a great alternative for strength and conditioning coaches. But it was kind of non-existent. I mean, most of the people who ran the weight room were football coaches, and that's what I was. I was a line coach working the weight room. But I wanted to be a strength coach. But it gave me the opportunity to see if I could coach. It's funny. We all say we want to coach, but yet now we get an opportunity, and it's like, oh, man, can you really coach? And that's what Pinecrest did for me. It gave me the confidence that, I can coach, and I'm pretty good at it. And I moved back to weight. I did try out for the World League of American Football, the old World League, and it failed that physical. And that's when I knew, okay, it's over. Your dream is shot. Get into it. But I had started powerlifting at that time because a buddy of mine at a gym in New York that I trained with at the summer was like, man, I can't believe you're done playing, but your competitiveness isn't over. You got to get into powerlifting. And I'm like, I'm not getting into powerlifting. I'm not strong enough. He goes, it has nothing to do with strong. It has to do with competing. And sure enough, he got me hooked, and I can, even now I'll jump into a deadlift meet here and there, but I've competed since 1989 as a powerlifter. And for about 20 years, pretty regularly. Then it kind of died off as family changes and injuries change your deal, and just time. It's just time to prepare for a meet the way you want to. So I went to after 2 years of Pinecrest, I went back to Wake Forest as a part-time assistant, and then my journey began at Boise and Arizona State, Utah, Louisville, and then the Panthers. So it's been a 32-year coaching journey, but a life probably from the time I'm 9. So what is that, 44 years of being somewhat involved in lifting weights and strength training on numerous different levels. So that's kind of my long story short. Still took 30 minutes. So.